Hey everyone, welcome back. Today's Wednesday, May 6th, right? And today we're going to look at still solving quadratics using square roots, but a couple things of focus. So first of all, today we're going to work on word problems. So I'm going to go through 4 examples, including Pythagorean theorem that hopefully you recall from before. And also, we're also going to talk about exact and approximate solutions. So what do we mean by exact versus approximate solutions? Well, most of the time when you're working with decimals, that's approximate, right? Because like if you think about the number 2 over 3, right? So that would be the exact solution because it's exactly 2 over 3. But if I change that to a decimal, it'd be 0.66666 repeating, which we typically write as 0.67. Well, that's rounded. So anytime you round, that's approximate, right? Versus if you leave the radical symbol or if you leave it as a fraction, that's the exact solution. So one of the most commonly rounded or approximated numbers is pi, right? Pi is 3.14. That's what we always round it, but we all know that it goes on forever. So if you use the symbol pi, that's exact. You use the number for pi, that's approximate, right? You're approximating, you're estimating what it should be. All right, so let's go through some examples here. Geometric and real-world applications. Example 1, an egg was dropped from the top of a building to the ground. The quadratic function below representing the height of the egg, h, after a given time t can be represented as h of t equals negative 16t squared plus 32. How long would it take for the egg to hit the ground? Okay, so what we are going to do is we are going to solve, right, for how long it would take. So that means we need to solve for t. Well, if that's the case, then I need a number to plug in here for h of t, which in this case, if it's hitting the ground, what would the height be at the ground? Yeah, it'd be 0, right? So this would be 0 equals negative 16t squared plus 32. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to use the same skills that we've developed over the last 2 days, and we're going to solve for t. Okay, so first thing, let's subtract 32, get it out of the way here. Again, draw your line if it helps you to organize your thoughts. Okay, negative 32 equals negative 16t squared, because this now cancels. Okay, and now I can divide it by negative 16. Divide by negative 16. That gives me a positive 2 because negative divided by a negative is a positive, equals t squared. Okay, and then when I take the square roots of both sides, I get a positive or negative radical 2 because it's not perfect, equals t. Alright, so what do we mean by positive or negative 2? Well, radical 2. First of all, remember that we're talking about time, right? So we don't really want negative time. You can't have negative time unless one of you designed a time-traveling machine, in which case, please Canvas message me, shoot me an email. Let's jump into Zoom and have a conversation so we can get rich. But otherwise, we don't need the negative symbol in this case because we're talking about time. So this would be our approximate or our exact answer. And our approximate, if you go to Desmos, you can pull it up. Approximate square root of 2 is 1.4142 blah 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 blah. It's actually an irrational number, it goes on forever. So we're just going to use 1.41 is approximately t as well. So in terms of seconds, it's about 1.41 seconds. Okay? All right, moving on. Example 2, given a right triangle with a leg of 8 meters and a hypotenuse of 12 meters, determine the length of the other leg in simplest radical form. Okay, so when you get an example like this, let's draw a picture to represent it, right? So I have a right triangle in this case. And remember, we know that something's a right triangle because one of the angles is 90 degrees. Okay, and also, when we're talking about a right triangle, we know that this is a leg. This is a leg, and across from the 90-degree angle is the hypotenuse. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use the fact that one of the legs is 8, the hypotenuse is 12, and we're going to find the length of the other one. All right, so again, if I redraw my triangle, oops, I don't know why I made it a rectangle. Okay, put my 90-degree angle. My hypotenuse is 12. One of the legs is 8, and I don't know what the other one is. Okay, so how are we going to solve this? Well, thankfully, a guy named Pythagoras came up with this theorem that we can use for right triangles that says that one leg squared plus the other leg squared equals the hypotenuse squared. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Hopefully you recall that. So let's go ahead and use that information. So the first leg was 8, square it. Second leg we didn't know, so we're going to use x, but we're still going to square it. And then you have the hypotenuse, which is 12, squared. Okay, so if we solve for x, we have 64 plus x squared equals 144. Now we're going to subtract 64 from both sides. Don't forget, if I'm moving too fast, you're more than welcome to stop, play it back again. X squared then equals 144 minus 64 is 80. Okay, and now we're going to take the square root of both sides. So x equals plus or minus, well, 80 is not a perfect square, but it does split into radical 16 times radical 5. And radical 16 simplifies to just a positive 4, so this is 4 radical 5. So this is plus or minus 4 radical 5. But again, can you have a negative length for your leg? No. So our exact answer is 4 radical 5. Okay. And our approximate answer is, up here at the top, 8.94. meters. So you can see, like, context is going to make a pretty big deal, right? Up to this point, we've used a lot of radical symbols, but now I'm allowing you to go ahead and use that decimal because they're approximate answers. So it makes more sense in certain cases, like especially the egg. How much time does it take? Well, you wouldn't want to tell somebody, hey, can you get that over to me in radical 2 seconds? Right? It doesn't make sense. But you could tell them, I need it in 1.41 seconds. Right? So it makes a little bit more sense to use the approximate in these situations. Okay. Next problem. Given a right triangle with a hypotenuse of 8 radical 2 and a leg of 10, find the length of the missing leg in simplest radical form. So hypotenuse, leg. Draw a triangle. Okay. Hypotenuse is 8 radical 2. One of the legs is 10. Got to put an x for the other one. All right. So again, we're going to use a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So one leg squared plus the other leg squared equals the hypotenuse squared. Okay, so 100 plus x squared equals, okay, well, this means that I'm squaring everything inside the parentheses, right? So that means 8 squared. So what is 8 squared? It is 64. And what is radical 2 squared? Well, remember that anytime you square a number and you take the square root, those are the exact opposites, right? They're the inverse operations. So because it's the square root of 2 squared, it's saying the square root of 2 times the square root of 2, which would be the square root of 4. And the square root of 4 is just 2. So this is 64 times 2. So 100 plus x squared equals 64 times 2 is 128. Okay. Subtract 100 from both. You get x squared equals 28. Okay, let's go ahead and take the square roots. X equals, that would split up into radical 7 times radical 4. So this would be 2 radical 7, because radical 4 simplifies to just 2. That's the exact solution. And the approximate is 2 radical 7. 5.29. Or about 5.3. So that's the approximate. Okay. Last example that we'll go through here today. The area of a rectangle is 34 square inches. What is the length? If the width is half the length. Okay, so we have an area of a rectangle is 34. So that's inches squared. What is the length if the width, so let's say that this is the length, this is the width. So let's see, an area of a rectangle is length times width. This is a 2-equation parter, right? What is the length of the width if the width is half the length? So what is the length if the width is half the length? So L divided by 2. Well, let's put these two formulas together now and substitute. So if the area is 34 and length times width, but it says right here that the width needs to be replaced. So let's go ahead and replace that. So 34 equals L times L divided by 2. I'm replacing it with this. Okay, so L times L is L squared divided by 2. Oh, that's a fraction. This one's pretty tough. We're going to get rid of the fraction here, multiply both sides by 2. So now I have 68 equals L squared. Take the square root of both sides. Oh, 68 even, which would be 34 and 2. Also 17 and 4 goes into it. So it'd be radical 17, radical 4, which would simplify to 2. So this would be 2. Radical 17 is the length. Okay, or, again, if they want the approximate, 2 radical 17, 8.25 is the length. So, same answer, just different context. All right, guys, that's it. So, I know they're a little bit tougher. Just remember, you're probably going to have an example. I think area of a rectangle, yep, right here, number 4. So, remember, area of a rectangle, area equals length times width. Okay, and then you can plug in the area, and then here it says, what is the width if the length is? So length is 2 times the width. Okay, think about what the word is means. All right, if you guys have any questions, jump into Zoom, Canvas message, email me. Don't forget to come up with that time machine so we can make a lot of money, and I will see you guys soon.